Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Jama and I'm with Women's Net, and we are so excited to have with us our third webinar series. And we have with us Misa from Perfectly Kept Books. And so today she's going to talk to us a little bit about some fundamental things we need to learn when we're running our businesses and doing our bookkeeping. We know that this is a frequently talked about thing in our applications. And so she's going to help us today to tell us some tips and some things that we should be aware of when doing our bookkeeping. And so thank you so much. So the way this format is going to go is Misa's going to talk for the first half of the presentation, and then some of you submitted questions, and then those questions will have Misa answer them at the very end of the presentation. So if you did submit a question and Misa has not answered it in her presentation, then they will be asked at the very end. So thank you so much for participating and for joining us today. And so Misa, take it away.
Thank you, Jama. I'm so happy to talk about bookkeeping, which is always fun. Let me go ahead and share. We'll get things going. And can you see my screen okay?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. Okay. So we're just going to get started. We're going to dive in, and I like to make bookkeeping fun, so I hope you find it fun and entertaining, maybe a little bit. So just starting from the beginning, what is bookkeeping? So when you think about bookkeeping, it's simply the process of recording the financial transactions in your business. So when money is moving around or it has to do with finances, it's probably going to touch your bookkeeping. And this is one of the most vital parts of running a business, but many people usually avoid it or push it to the side. And we don't want to do that because it's very, very important. And why is it important is it's not just for tax season. A lot of times people will say, oh, yeah, I need to do my bookkeeping because I need to file taxes. But really, your bookkeeping is something that you're going to use day to day to run your business, because it's telling you exactly what's happening in your business, what's going on, what changes you need to make. Are you making money? Are you not making money? It's answering all of those questions for you. So that's why you actually want to do the bookkeeping. This is something that a lot of people always ask. They're like, well, when do I need to do my bookkeeping? And it's something that needs to be done year round. So in my world, we do bookkeeping on a monthly basis. So every month you should be logging into your bookkeeping system, however you're doing it, and updating your books. And then we're going to walk through the different steps that you would want to take to do your bookkeeping. But something to keep in mind is that it is something that you're doing on an ongoing basis and not just one time at the end of the year to file taxes. So what can you use to do your bookkeeping? You can use a spreadsheet. That's perfectly fine. Or you can use bookkeeping software. So either option works. Really, at the end of the day, use whatever you're going to actually update and use on a consistent basis. If you're not going to log into a spreadsheet, don't use a spreadsheet. If you're not going to log into a software, don't use a software, at least in the beginning or as your business is growing. I typically recommend using software just because we want technology to help us a little bit and to take some of the manual work out of the bookkeeping process, but it's completely up to you. You just want to use something. And some options for small businesses: QuickBooks Online, Xero, FreshBooks, Wave. Those are some options you can choose from. And I typically recommend QuickBooks Online, but you can use whatever works for you. I'm not going to tell you what to use. I usually recommend you can try them all. Get a trial, see how you like it, see if it works for you, see if it's something that you enjoy using, and then go with that option. The main thing to remember is that we want to do bookkeeping. So if you don't like the software, don't use it. So now we're going to get into the good stuff, how to actually do your bookkeeping. I kind of have this kind of like 5-step process of what needs to happen so that you can make sure your bookkeeping is being done. And so it's categorize, reconcile, review, check in, and then celebrate. So we're going to dive into each one of those. So categorize. When you think about categorizing, what this really means is every transaction that happens within your business, one, it needs to be recorded in your bookkeeping system, and then it needs to be assigned to a folder. So it belongs somewhere. Is it income? Is it an expense? And then what type of income or what type of expense is it? We need to know exactly what things are, because when you're running your reports, that's going to tell you what's actually happening. So you don't want to have something categorized as like other business expense or miscellaneous, because that doesn't really tell you anything. So when you're categorizing, you usually spend the most time doing this part in your bookkeeping, because it's the most important, because you want to put things in the right place and make sure they're in the right categories. But always remember to assign it to a very specific category, and nothing that's generic or general that's not very helpful to you. After you've categorized everything at the end of the month, so this is something you would want to do on a monthly basis, you're going to come in and reconcile your books. And reconciling, just at a very basic level, is comparing your bank statements to your bookkeeping system. And you want to make sure that they match. When you're reconciling, you're just kind of double checking yourself. And most people skip this step, but it's a very, very important step, because when you reconcile, that's where you catch errors or issues or duplicates, things that may have gone wrong while you were doing your bookkeeping. You can usually catch it when you reconcile. Most people don't reconcile, and I have cleaned up a lot of books where income is not accurate because there's missing transactions or there's duplicated transactions. And we don't want that to happen, because we want your numbers to be correct. So reconciling will help you to do that. And this is where using software actually can help, because it makes it very, very easy to download your statement, enter the information into the software, and then be able to compare your software to your bank statement. After you've reconciled, now you really want to actually see what's happening in your bookkeeping. So you want to run your financial reports and actually look at them and review them. Many times people are not looking at the reports, or they're not looking at all of them, because there are three main financial reports that you want to look at. So we of course have our profit and loss or income statement, which shows, your business revenue, your expenses, and then your net profit or loss. Then you have your balance sheet, which gives you just an overview of what's happening with your business. So it shows what your business owns, so your assets, what you owe, your liabilities, and then what's left over for you as the owner or shareholder, your equity. And then the last report that you would want to review is the statement of cash flows. I usually say this is the report that doesn't get enough love, because it's the report that actually is telling you what happened to your actual cash. So this is actually going to match what's in your bank account. A lot of times people will look at their P&L and they'll say, oh, I had X amount in profit, but that's not what's in my bank account. And that's because your P&L isn't accounting for what's happening with the actual movement of cash. So your cash flow statement will show you. So if you as the business owner, you're taking owner's draws or distributions, you'll see that there. If you're making loan payments or credit card payments, you'll see it there. So you want to put all of these reports together to get a full picture of what's happening in your business, and not just rely solely on the profit and loss, because it only gives you part of the picture. After you've reviewed the reports and you're like, okay, I know where I am, I know what I need to do from here, you want to go ahead and check in on your goals. So you probably have goals for your business, maybe revenue goals, or you're trying to lower expenses, whatever your goals are. This is a good time to kind of review those, and then you can use the actual bookkeeping that you've done to compare and see where you are. Like, did you meet the goal, or do you need to make some adjustments? What's happening in your business that you need to do to reach those goals? So this is a good time to just kind of like sit back, look and see, okay, what is my bookkeeping telling me? And what do I need to do to move forward and reach the goals that I've set out for my business? And then finally, we definitely want to celebrate all of our wins, whether they're big or small. I think a lot of times we forget to just take time and recognize any accomplishment that we've had. So it's not just revenue goals. It's not just, oh, I earned a profit. Just whatever happens in your business that you can celebrate, you want to take the time to do that. Because as business owners, there's a lot happening. We're usually busy and we don't always take the time to just say, wow, I've come a long way, or wow, my business has really grown. And so just taking that time out just to kind of see where you are, see where you've grown, see where you can, where you can go from here. It's always great to just celebrate it and acknowledge how great you are doing at this moment. Okay, so now who should do your bookkeeping? My philosophy is your bookkeeping has to get done, and it doesn't really matter who does it. So you can do your own bookkeeping, you can DIY, which I usually encourage, especially in the beginning, just so that you can get in there, get your hands dirty, understand what's happening, understand what a bookkeeper should be doing, so that when you get to the point that you're ready to outsource, you can provide a little bit of oversight to that bookkeeper. So in the beginning, it's perfectly fine if you need to DIY, it's not a problem. Just making sure that you know how to do what you're doing with the bookkeeping, and just reach out to a bookkeeper if you need to help you get set up or get some training if you need it. And then when you get to the point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do bookkeeping anymore, or I'm just going to outsource it because I just don't want to bother with it, then you can hire a bookkeeper and then they can go in and handle all the day to day. And then it's just a matter of you guys collaborating so that you can work together to make sure that your books are accurate, they're in order, and you're getting the information that you need to run the business. Some key things to remember. So the first thing to always remember is to keep your business and personal finances separate. This is something you will hear all bookkeepers and accountants talk about because it's an area that a lot of business owners kind of mess up in the beginning, because when you're starting a business, sometimes you may not have the business account open yet, and so you're using a personal account. But you want to keep them separate as early as possible, because it's going to make not only your life easier, but it's going to keep things clean. So if you have that dedicated business account in one place and then your personal account separate from that, it will help to keep things organized, and it will make bookkeeping so much easier for you. When it comes to business deductions, because a lot of people are like, well, what can I deduct in my business? Two words to keep in mind would be ordinary and necessary. And these are actually words that the IRS uses to define what is a deductible business expense. So when you're thinking about, is this something I can deduct for my business? Just remember, is it ordinary and necessary for my particular business? And so pretty much it's like, does it make sense? And not only does it make sense for my particular business? Every business is different. So there are some expenses that make more sense for some than others, but that's something just to keep in mind. If you can answer this question and say, yes, this is ordinary and necessary, you're probably fine to deduct the expense. Document, document, document. I can't tell you how important it is to document everything. Document as much as possible. And this is what your bookkeeping is doing. It's helping you to document what's happening with your finances. So use your bookkeeping system for that. Add in notes, make sure you're keeping copies of receipts, making sure you have like folders and things organized so that you know where to find any type of backup for whatever's happening in your finances. The documentation is going to matter, because if worst case scenario, you are ever audited by the IRS and they come poking around in your books, you will need to be able to provide proof of any business expenses that you have deducted. So if you have the necessary documentation, you've been keeping up with your books, you won't have any problems, and you don't really have to worry about the fact if you ever get audited. Then something to keep in mind, if you use contractors, collect W-9s from them, before you pay them. So upfront, collect copies of their W-9 forms so that you have them on file to make 1099 filing easier. But then also it's going to save you the headache later when you try to collect, if you get to December and January and you need to file 1099s and you don't have W-9s on file. Sometimes it's harder to get it from people later. And so if you just get it up front, most people are very happy and willing to provide that W-9 because they want to get paid. And then finally, something I always encourage business owners to do is to ask for help. Ask for help as soon as possible. If you have a question, ask the question. It's okay to ask the question, but just find a person or place that you can go to get those questions answered. And you want to ask those questions sooner rather than later, because you don't want, years to go by and then you're like, I didn't know this, or I don't know how to do this, but you had the question from day one. So just ask the question, because I guarantee someone else has the same question as you. So tying things together with taxes, because a lot of times when we think about bookkeeping, we always think about taxes. And so something to remember is you need good bookkeeping in order to file taxes. So when your tax preparer is getting ready to file your taxes, they're going to need good books. If the books aren't in order or the information is incorrect, it will make tax filing harder, and you could possibly file inaccurate taxes, which we don't want to do. So the bookkeeping and taxes, they go together, but the bookkeeping is the foundation of everything. And from there, that's where you can do the tax filing. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, what do you need for your business? So a lot of times there's so many different types of service providers out there, as far as like tax accountants and fractional CFOs and bookkeepers, and you hear all these different names and words, and this kind of tells you what you need for your business. At a bare minimum, every business needs bookkeeping, no matter what, no matter if you're just starting or if you've been in business for years, every business needs bookkeeping. And then after bookkeeping, you want to make sure you have tax compliance. So you're filing your taxes on time. You want to make sure that you're doing that. That is the bare minimum that you need for any business that you have. If you have your bookkeeping and your tax compliance, you have the bare minimum covered. As your business grows and as things happen and change within your business, then you can layer in tax planning and strategy. And so what that does is that takes the tax compliance a step further. And so it allows you to kind of actually plan, what's happening in your life or your business, and how can we utilize what's happening to best support your tax situation. So those are conversations where you want to have with your tax strategist, and they can dig a little deeper and say, okay, this is happening in your business and this is happening in your personal life, because they're looking at the full picture, and then they can actually make plans and strategies based on your situation. And then if you want to take things a step further, when you start getting into budgeting and forecasting and cash flow, that's when you get into the fractional CFO territory. And that's when, your business is probably doing well and, it's growing. And now you're just like, okay, I want to take things to the next level. So now what do I need to do? And then then you go into like the strategic growth. So the higher level things, they're nice to have as your business grows, but they're not necessary like right out the gate, or you don't have to do it today. But something that you do have to do today is bookkeeping and tax compliance. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as what you need for your business. And yeah, so that is all I have for my presentation. So
Misa, thank you so much for
you're
this
welcome.
practical information and for helping us to understand this. I do see some raised hands.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the hands or the questions that we do have were to be submitted beforehand. just to keep in line with our time constraints today. And so for our first question that was sent in, you talked a little bit about fractional CEOs, but what would a fractional bookkeeper look like in terms of cost?
So say, you can't afford to full on outsource your bookkeeping, you could find a bookkeeper who can maybe come in quarterly just to double check your work, or have someone that can be like on call, where you can, maybe they're not doing your bookkeeping, you're doing it, but then there's someone that you can contact with questions. So that's kind of what like a fractional kind of role would look like. It's more so like just a bookkeeper that can support you while you're doing it yourself.
Okay. And so contacting a bookkeeper, they would understand what would be meant by a fractional bookkeeper. So that's great. And so let's talk a little bit about a payroll solution for those businesses that actually utilize a lot of contractors. So do you recommend using a payroll system or solution for these types of things? Or are these payroll systems that are out there really only good for those businesses that run payroll every 2 weeks? Because we know that paying contractors is a little different.
So it all comes down to cost. So how much are you willing to spend for a solution? And then also, what options do you already have like at your convenience? Most of the time, your bank has options to pay people directly from your bank account. So for example, the contractors that I use, I pay them directly from my bank account, and I'm not using a payroll system. So it's not required, but it can make things easier just because it can streamline your process. You pay everyone out of one system, it makes it easier. And then usually the payroll providers are like collecting those W-9s and issuing the 1099s for you. So it depends on what level of effort and work you want to put into it.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is, it's a wonderful question. So tracking philanthropic efforts correctly. So for example, let's say a company sells a product and then they promise to donate 5% to charity. So it's easy enough to figure out the dollar amount for this 5%, but how can this be cleanly tracked in our books?
So what I would do in that situation is set up two separate income accounts. So you can have like your regular income account, and then you can have a separate one for like the charity or however you want to name it. So just have a separate one. And then whenever you're going in to categorize your income, you'll split the income. So, if you get that deposit from today's sales, split it between what you receive, what you're going to keep for the business, and then the 5% that you're going to pay out. That way you have a whole bucket sitting there waiting for you, and then you know what amount needs to be paid out.
Okay, thank you. It reminds me of the all those folders that you had.
Yeah.
So you would create a folder for that
Yes.
specifically.
Yes.
Awesome. And so this next question, it's a little hairy. I'm a first-time business owner, but I've delayed my 2023 taxes. So this individual owns a thrift store and purchases a lot of inventory. So for now, right now, moving forward, they're using Venmo and PayPal. But before they started, they were using cash and collecting cash. And so now it's gotten a little difficult trying to reconcile all of this. So do you have any advice for this or some
So,
feedback you can give?
so I will say, when it does come to using cash, documentation is even more important, because there's literally nothing to track it back to if you don't have like a piece of paper or an invoice or some type of document. So if you don't have that documentation, it's going to be hard to go back and say, oh, what did I receive or spend this cash on? But going forward, what you can do is make sure you're getting some type of documentation. Any kind will work. And then even taking it a step further is you could keep a cash log. So create a spreadsheet with a cash log and go in and log any cash you receive or spend and make notes on what it is. And then you can probably even make a note of what type of backup you have, just so that you can kind of cover all your bases and not miss anything, because cash is one of those things that If you don't account for it, it's kind of like, I don't know what happened to
Yeah.
it. So yeah, that's where documentation is really, really important. It's when you're dealing with cash.
Okay. So lesson learned and moving forward is just best
Yes.
at this point. And so internet working with international clients and payment methods. So we know many of our women-owned businesses do work with clients overseas. And so what are the best methods to collect payments with these customers?
So nowadays there are like a ton of options out there. So I usually start with your bank. That's the first thing I would say. Start with whatever bank you're using, start with them to see what options they have. Because a lot of times the easiest way to get payment between, like the US and somewhere international is like through a wire transfer.
Yeah.
That's usually the easiest. So I would say check with your bank to see like what are the fees for that and what's all required. But then there are some other options, like you can look into Stripe, you can look into Wise, WISE, because those are some other options. But there are literally a ton of them out there. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot. So I would also look at the convenience for you and
Yeah.
also look at the costs, because when you're doing business internationally, it usually costs a little bit more. So just because,
Mhm.
dealing with, international banks and all of that, it's usually a little bit more expensive. So just consider that. So I would definitely start with your bank first, and then you can explore your other options.
Awesome. Very good. Yes. Sometimes our banks will help walk us through that and help give us better rates. And so
Yes, exactly.
thank you so much, Misa, and thank you everybody for participating and or coming to our webinar series. We will be posting this on our resource center page in a few days, and so please also check our resource center page under accounting and finance. So this is where the webinar is going to sit under, and then Misa also has a link to some additional resources that she's posted on her website to help get started with having clean and organized and perfectly kept books. So thank you so much for being with us, Misa.
Thank you, Jama. It was so
All
great.
right,
Thank you.
take care. Bye, everyone.